as well?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question, by the way. I think it goes back to my dad always used to tell me this when I was in college. He was like, your life is going to be a giant game of Frogger. You're not always just going to jump forward. You're going to have to go sideways sometimes. You're going to go back. You're going to fall in the water. You need to figure it out because the game doesn't stop just because you fell in. You just got to reset.
All right, guys. So, hey, I am so excited to have this guy here with me. Not only is he an awesome human, he is the program director for athletic performance at the gym I go to, Peak Human Performance. He has been more instrumental to my life than he realizes. He has this unique ability to understand what you need to hear when you need to hear it, but without telling you exactly what you need to hear. And to me, that is a huge, huge talent that I'm not so sure he knows he has yet, but maybe we'll get into it a little bit. But I want to welcome Rob Smaldino to the podcast.
Thanks, sir.
How's it going, my friend?
It's going well.
Awesome. So this is also a really cool landmark thing because you're the first ever guest. And so hopefully one day we'll look back at this and be like, holy cow. After
like the 10th or 11th one that I've been on.
Exactly. Yeah. You'll be like the Steve Martin of this podcast. Just keep having you come back because it's just going to be so great.
Perfect.
But, what I would like to kind of get into and to kind of give everybody that's listening to this for the first time, and I know you're the first guest, so kind of share what I hope for this to become. It's a podcast where I call it like an anti-guru podcast, where we're really trying to help people see solutions through hearing other people's stories.
Okay.
So rather than just giving them the answers, we want them to see that just like you and I, they have the same struggles we do.
It's to be seen.
To be seen.
And
correct,
to be heard.
Right.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of people in this world right now are going through life invisible, thinking maybe that their struggles are alone. And to understand that everyday people around you are always overcoming things.
Right.
And rather than just being focused on what I can't do, what can I do? And to me, I think that you're a great example of that. And what I see happen to you and for you and all these things and people I hear talk about you behind your back in a good way and all that good stuff like that.
Please.
But if you could just kind of maybe give us some sort of background of what brought you into coaching and what made you want to choose that.
Oh, yeah. Cool. In and out of sports, like a lot of sports in high school, was constantly getting hurt because I have little man syndrome and a glass ceiling. So I was putting myself in situations that I probably should have never been in. So I was in physical therapy a decent amount in high school. And I was like, all right, I want to be like, I know I'm not going to be probably going to college for a sport. There's been just too many things, too many things in the way for me to do that. So I want to be the person like my physical therapist who can keep you from needing a physical therapist. And so I went to Ohio State, got my bachelor's in exercise science. And it was originally in pre-physical therapy until I found out that only about 2% of physical therapists work with athletes. And that's exactly where I wanted to be. I wanted to be around that. And so when I switched to exercise science, I started exploring other routes. And the other thing was coaching. It was becoming a strength and conditioning coach. So got my master's at University of Dayton. And while I was there, I was interning with basically every sport they have. It's a great environment. But something about like the school aspect made it kind of challenging. I wanted to go see what the private sector was all about. And end up getting a job at Bo Jackson Elite Sports right up the road from Peak, actually. And they were great to me. They took me on as an intern originally, and then they were willing to give me a job. And the only problem is that the hours were not feasible financially for me to be able to sustain it. So I actually had to go the humble route and pick up my old surfing job. And so, which is not embarrassing at all. But it was exactly what I needed because I went on Indeed during my lunch break that one day, and I searched strength and conditioning coach positions that are available, and Peak Human Performance happened to be a half mile up the road. I was like, well, I have 45 minutes. I'm going to put in my application, and then I'm going to drive there because my dad has always been like, you got to be in front of the people. They're going to respect that you did that. And so I drove there, and it was back when Alex, which Alex, the owner of the business, it was before he had his 2 daughters. So he was training a lot. He was the only one there. Started BSing with him for a little bit. And he was like, wait a minute, you said your name was Rob, right? And I was like, yeah. He's like, did you just put your application in like 30 seconds before you walked in? I was like, yeah, I actually did. It was right next door. So, and so ultimately,
my peak, man.
Yeah. So ultimately he took me under his wing, and exactly what I wanted to be as a coach, he's allowed me to do, and he's helped me do that. And so, it's just funny because in every environment I've been in terms of, like, I've worked in plenty of gyms. I've worked in strength and conditioning facilities. I've interned in 4 different strength and conditioning facilities. And there's something about coaching there that feels different. And I think it's because he helped me get to know me a little bit, which helped me get to know other people and how I should speak to them. So when you're talking about like the awareness portion, like I'm flattered, but I don't even catch it. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's so ingrained, I suppose, but it's like, I guess in the short version of is I wanted to be a physical therapist, but I wanted to assure that I was around athletes because I wanted to give athletes a future that I never could have. Right. And that's how I got here.
That's awesome. Man. Thanks for sharing. So yeah. There's a couple things in there that I'd like to dig a little deep in.
Sure.
And one of them being that you talked about, like, your dream was the physical therapy route because you wanted to be an athlete. Mm-hmm. And you were looking for a new solution. So isn't it interesting how when we start down those paths, what we think we want, how another solution pops up? How do you find that has like served you to be a coach better, and as you've evolved in learning who you are as well?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question, by the way. I think it goes back to my dad always used to tell me this when I was in college. He was like, your life is going to be a giant game of Frogger. Mm. You're not always just going to jump forward. You're going to have to go sideways sometimes. You're going to go back. You're going to fall in the water. You need to figure it out because the game doesn't stop just because you fell in. Mm. You just got to reset. So it's interesting as a coach because every coach, it's just a walking puzzle you're looking at. You're trying to figure out, all right, what fits where, and how can I get them to understand what I need them to do, have them do it correctly, feel it correctly, and get where they need to go. Sometimes it's not like one cue isn't always going to work. One exercise isn't always going to work. There's going to be there's no one size fits all for any of this. So it's ultimately trying to figure that out. But when it came to my future, I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. Exercise science is such a broad degree that you could be doing corporate wellness. You could go into dietetics and everything like that. So there were a lot of different routes. So it was like, which one do I actually gravitate towards? Because it's hard because it's exercise is a hobby of mine. I enjoy exercise, but what am I drawn to? It was athletes. Being in that competitive environment is something that I love being around. Right. And I never knew it. Well, I guess I knew it, but I didn't know that was why when I was making that decision.
Right.
And so when it came down to it, I was like, all right, what's going to assure that I'm around athletes all the time? And that was it. So
what is it exactly about being around athletes? And I guess maybe another part is knowing the difference between, because I know that when you say athlete, you're talking all the way kids to adults that you train. So I don't want people to think that just athletes means that you have to play for the Buckeyes or play professional. But right, exactly. So, but there is that interesting side of it. So what is it about when you're coaching that you can see in a potential of somebody that you almost kind of feel like you want to pull it out of them? Because that's one of my big things is I really want to pull out potential. What is it as a coach that makes you know when it's time to push the gas pedal and when it's time to push it back? Because that's one of the things I think you do really well.
That is a crazy balance. And it stems a lot from knowing the person in front of you. And whether there's really not there's not a set way that I'll go about it, but I'm 100% making sure that I have morale at a high level, and I'm building morale right off the bat. Because you already know me from the gym that I'm an extrovert. I will go out of my way to speak to somebody, and I have no problem making a fool of myself, which I've done plenty of times.
Dude,
but
I'm telling you, guys, just so you know anywhere, this guy dresses up at Halloween like goes all out. Like came as Freddie Mercury one time, shaved the beard, mustache, whole deal, had a mic stand. Like, dude goes all out in it. So definitely gotta just stop here for that and talk about he is not a shy.
Not afraid of making an ass of myself now. But what some of the things that I've learned at Peak specifically was that a lot of people get turned off by that. Introverts, when they see an extrovert acting the way they do, their shell closes even further. And when you have it doesn't matter how hard I'm going to knock on this shell, you're not going to open that until I've given you the ability to hey, do this on your own. I need you to come out of your shell on your own, build some trust with me, know that I'm not going to steer you in the wrong direction. And then ultimately, when you start to come out of the shell, we can start having that conversation. Because ultimately, when it comes down to it, and I think, who was it that always says this before his shows? There's a comedian who says this before his shows, and I want to say it's Kevin Hart. Says, everybody wants to be the best, but nobody wants to work for it, which is the goddamn truth. 100%. So you had mentioned, whether it's college, collegiate, or I'm sorry, not collegiate, but collegiate or professional.
Right.
We train kids as young as 8 years old.
Right.
And it's just learning it's all foundational work when they're that age and making it fun for them. But those things that they learn at that age set them up for success well outside of sports, because ultimately it's lifelong habits that are going to build a healthy adult. But then also, if they're actually I've had talks with an 8-year-old kid who's I want to make the NFL. It's all right, we're a long way away from it, so I need you to stay dialed in. But you're also 8, so let's find the time to have that bigger conversation. But yeah, I guess the balance is tough. It's not something that's again, a one size fits all.
Right.
But
so in that idea of what I think most people, it's safe to say, when they think athletic, they think muscles, and they think of all the movements and agility and all these different things. My son, as you know, is a basketball, and I have tried to explain it. Maybe I'm doing a bad job, so this is me.
No, as a father, you know nothing in his eyes. You know that, right?
Exactly. But I'm trying to give him the best advice. So maybe this is me asking you a coaching question. Is that I tell him all the time that I believe that basketball is 80% mental and 20% physical.
It might even be more.
What do you think in terms of how important is it for anybody, athlete or just a person trying to do the impossible? How much of that actually comes down to physically pushing the weight, so to speak, versus thinking and being that image in your head of what you want to achieve?
It's more than 80%, I would say. So there was, ultimately, it kind of comes down to what got you here will ultimately keep you here. If you want to make it to the next level, you got to do next level shit, right?
Yeah.
So that's it's a giant funnel. So if you start with your talent got you to this level, in order to get to the next level, that funnel gets smaller, and that's where you really got to be dialed in on something, whether that be mindset, that could be your nutrition, that could be your recovery, so many things. Everyone's talent got them to high school basketball. Let's just say high school basketball.
Right.
In order to make college, I think I did the numbers. There was a talk I used to give at there was a prep school up in Cleveland. I cannot remember the name of it right now, but anyway. And there was 575,000 male basketball players last year.
Wow.
Of that, about 30,000 get a D1, a D2, or D3 scholarship.
Wow.
That is a much smaller number.
Absolutely.
Among that 30,000, there's 4,000 that are eligible to make it to the to graduate or make it to the league,
right?
And 60 get picked.
Wow, it's amazing.
Every year. So anybody, if you ever see somebody on, in the NBA, know that they are not just talented or they're not awful at their game. Right. they might be awful to you, but what was that? Brian Scalabrine. Do you remember that guy? He used to play for the Celtics, red hair.
Yes.
He said, I might be nowhere near LeBron, at all, but I am so much closer to LeBron than you are to me.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great.
And it's such a badass quote first off, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
Those who make the league, that he had to do something way more than just be good at basketball.
Right. Right.
There's so much beyond that.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an unsung part of just being the next version of yourself.
Right. And so like, you know, what part of that do you think that like being able to see that? So like being like Rodney Mullins is a skateboarder, and he used to always say that like, you know, it's you can everybody has the machine to do it. It's the gears behind it.
Oh my God.
Like how often do you see the difference between like those? How much does that show up when you're training an athlete? Can you really tell like the ones that quote unquote will make it, or that have that drive? And if there is, like, what's the characteristic that you kind of see as a consistent, maybe across all of those kids or adults or whatever?
So you can see it. It's actually pretty clear too, because it's the kid who isn't afraid to ask a question. And not like the ones that their parents are asking for them. Like it's the kid who's like, hey, I want to talk with you a little bit more about my nutrition. A lot of people will ask about that, but then it's the kid who's like, all right, I did that. Now what? I did that. Now what? I did that. Now what? That domino effect, like it's that kid.
Right.
It's the kid that, hey, there's a group that I'll always ask my group, says, all right, who ate before this?
Right.
Show of hands. Cool. We didn't. You did. Cool. Who's getting at least 8 hours sleep? It was like random basic questions, but it's the kid who might not have been raising his hand originally, but by the second week, he's raising his hand for everything. By the third week, it's like not even a question. By the fourth week, he's showing up early. He's doing like it's the work that's happening outside of the walls that's going to make inside of the walls a lot better.
Right. Right.
So I always tell them, like, if you're training 3 days a week, 1 hour at a time, just as an example, that's 3 out of 167 hours in a week. It's like 2 to 3% of your week.
Right.
What's done in there, albeit it's going to make you sore and going to make you better, and the mechanics are there, but the other 97%, what are you working on? Because if you're not, then you're doing yourself a disservice. And it's not like always like harder is always better or more is always better, but like how is it better? So like knowing when to have planned recovery and how to set yourself up for success. So that way in that 3%, you can go 100%.
Right. Right.
And it's like, it's not super clearly defined. It's like one of those, like you can't define it, but you know it when you see it.
Yeah.
And it's, again, it's unmistakable.
Right. So it's interesting you say it, because I've had this conversation with my kid and a couple of his friends. They associate getting to the next level with doing workouts. And, you know, when an injury happens, they think it's a setback. They think it's I love the fact, just want to acknowledge what you said, that it's not always just about lifting and doing work. There's other stuff that you could be doing. So anybody that is, you know, going through life, and let's say that they aren't an athlete, they're just trying to, you know, lose 20 pounds or trying to get their foot in the door, you know, at a gym or whatever it could be. Like, what is it that you would recommend to them as that first step, or that one spot when some setback happens or some pivot point happens in your life where you have to adjust to? Like, what would you say is the thing maybe you've learned from your experience, or something in life, or a parent or whatever, that has taught you what that pivot point might look like?
So there was a portion in there that I really liked what you said. I think one of the important things is, have you ever heard of TNDO, take no days off?
Yes.
I'm all for that when it comes to like, it doesn't need to be a workout, or it doesn't need to be a training session, because there's no days that you should have off of working on yourself. Right. But what that can look like is not always physical. There is the mental aspect of it. You yourself, you journal all the time. Right. You reflect all the time. Right. That's working on yourself. Right. As an athlete, you should be doing that as well, because if you're not learning from the lessons that are directly in front of you, you're bound to make the same mistakes. Yeah. And then you don't get any better, and then you go, this just doesn't work. Right. In terms of like the pivot, like as an injury, as like a setback, it could easily be, it's a hard thing to come back from. But in terms of the physical, there's always workarounds. Second, like, that's the time where I'm going to try and dial in on mindset. That's the time I'm going to dial in on body. That's the time where mobility becomes something like there's always something you can be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's figuring out, and again, it's trial and error, because they're going through the trials and tribulations of an injury. It's really fucking sucks.
Yeah.
But and it sucks because it's usually, like you were just saying, workout, burnout, injured.
Yeah.
And then they go, well, now I'm not working hard. I'm falling behind. It's like, well, if you were just focusing on what you were doing before this, you wouldn't have burnt out or got hurt.
Right.
So if you were focusing on your recovery and actually taking, it's the ones that I'll ask, just to go back to it, the past question you said, it's the ones that I'll ask, like, hey, when did you go to bed last night? I don't know. Probably not.
Yeah.
It's the ones that are like, yeah, I went to bed at 8.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that they have to go to bed early, but did you prioritize your sleep?
Yeah.
And not only quantity, but quality.
Right.
Like, how are you setting up for bed? Because if you're just falling asleep, then that's your body just shutting down. You're like, the way that you kind of set up your sleep should will indicate the quality as well.
Right.
So if it's just nobody cares work harder, well, guess what? Somebody's going to care. It's going to be you, because you're going to get hurt.
Right.
Right. So, but in the case of an injury, that's where we go, okay, well, what caused it? Because that's what we need to avoid.
Right.
And then having the ability to like kind of turn the mirror back and go, hey, this is what happened. It's not because I'm not working hard enough. It's because I was doing too much on limited sleep. Because you're never gonna out train a poor sleeping pattern. You're never gonna outwork a poor dietary habits. You're never gonna outwork a bad mindset or a weak mindset. You're never gonna be able to outdo any of that.
Right.
So you need all of them to work together. I think when I first started, Alex told me, if you're only working on the performance side of things, if you're only working on like the lifting or the conditioning or anything like that, it's like trying to run a 12-cylinder vehicle on 3 cylinders. The car will run,
right,
but it will never be at racing speed.
Right.
And that's exactly it.
Absolutely. It's interesting because like you kind of go back a little bit in what you were talking about, the Frogger analogy you were talking about your dad. It really is like, it is looking left to right because things move faster. It is understanding you might have to jump back on the log for a second. Like things are going to happen.
But it doesn't mean the game's over.
Right. It doesn't mean the game's over. It just means you have to adjust as things coming. I'm just curious about like, how does this coaching aspect of your life and the stuff, I mean, you've mentioned your dad a couple of times. We've talked about your dad a couple of times. I know what he means to you. Like, what are those parts that outside of coaching world, what does Rob lean on from either stuff you take from your job or life or your dad that have been the most, when you're at that spot where it's just hitting? And we all know what that feels like.
Yeah.
What is it that you kind of like lean on? Is there like a go-to thing that when you're alone, away from the highlights of everything else, and you got to figure out that gear, or you had the Frogger back to the log? What is it that you tend to kind of lean back on?
Support system.
Yeah.
That could be in the framework of my father, my fiance, my sisters, any of my friends. I've leaned on you plenty of times. And so it's knowing that you don't have to be alone. Like people have been through similar things, and it's not even so much like a competition, but it's like when I'm starting to spiral on that, or if I'm feeling that way, like I'm always leaning on somebody else because I know that they've had me before.
Right.
And I don't know, it's tough because there's been plenty of times where I don't even take my own advice. And it's like, why am I not? If I am going to give it to somebody, like instead of burning yourself out, there's been plenty of times where it's like, all right, I'll take on another client. And now my schedule's full and I am up to my teeth in sessions where I can't keep up with the other mundane things that I need to do throughout my day. I get overwhelmed and then I shut down.
Right.
And it's such an avoidable thing, but I keep sticking the stick in my own spoke. So when that happens, like being an extrovert, being around them is super grounding to me.
Right.
And I think that that's something that like really brings me back in. Okay, you need to handle this because it's not just going to go away.
Right.
And again, with that game of Frogger, like there's no days off. There's no day off
Right.
from the world around us. So we need to be able to, like plan on having, lighter times or like getting your shit done.
Right.
So that way you don't have this moment where you have to completely shut down. Cause there was a while where, maybe only a few years ago where I was like having like constant panic attacks where I was like, you need to like get a grip on something. Like
right.
it was really challenging, but it was the moment I started telling people about it that I knew like had me emotionally, it started to slowly fizzle away. And I started getting more into meditative stuff. I started getting more into reflecting and actually like journaling on it. It's like, all right, when this is happening, what should I do? Or what do I feel like is going to happen? So I actually did it's funny because I actually just looked back at this last week because I turned to a random journal page in this journal that I keep. And I wrote down, it's like, when I'm having a panic attack, It's like, feel.
Right.
This is going to happen, whatever. And then I put a tally on how, and the last little portion was panic attacks since whatever date. And I've written down like, feel like I'm going to pass out. Feel like I'm not in control of my own body. Feel like the room's spinning. And every single one of these things that I wrote down, it's like a visceral reaction. And I remember looking down, and eventually I got to a point where it's like, I have tallied 10 of these.
Wow.
But not a single one of these things that I was afraid of happened. I would put a tally
right.
if I did pass out.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I did do, but everything was in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's something like so earth-shattering with that. It's like, so everything that I'm in fear of doesn't happen when I have these.
Yeah.
So what the hell is my problem?
Yeah.
So it was super enlightening. It was kind of crazy. So
I feel like that's a whole nother episode we can riff on for sure. Because I mean, understanding how we are the creators of our world is just, mind blowing. It's interesting because like, as I'm listening to you tell these stories, it is like so apparent to me now how much awareness plays a key role in you and your like even in your journaling. Like guys at our gym, we have this whiteboard, and Rob always at the bottom of the whiteboard writes these little things. And if you follow me on Instagram, I always take a photo of them and post in my stories and stuff like that because they're just these little like drawings or doodles or whatever that like that he just kind of drops these things. And one of the things that I really want to just like celebrate Rob and this whole thing is just that you have people in your life every day just like him that are going by and they're dropping little nuggets in your life. And just like you had mentioned before, all those tallies, they aren't real, but those people dropping those things in your life, they are real.
Right.
And for example, I can use my own perspective, and then I want to ask you, like our last question to kind of wrap this up is, when I lift, Rob will come by me and just say how to feel. And to me, that little question to me registers, did I pay attention to myself? Am I aware of what I'm doing? Am I in the moment? Am I enjoying this? Am I celebrating life right now? Am I here? He is asking me from a mechanical standpoint.
You're hearing me exactly the exact right way then. Because that's what I mean.
Okay.
It's very easy again, to go back to that same question of the person who wants to make it to the next level. When I say that, if it's small talk to you, then no.
Right.
If it's something like that, that's is exactly what I'm looking for.
Right.
So go ahead.
Oh no, that's really it. I mean, it's, and I just want to celebrate that because these little things like this, I just want to bounce back and echo everything you were saying about like how these are the parts that have helped me beat this stupid brain tumor. It's understanding that these people have been in my life, my whole life, like dropping nuggets, like you were talking about your dad, like all these people that will drop these little things. And it's a matter of us paying attention to them, in that game life of Frogger, like understanding that bounce back isn't a setback. It just happens to be what's happening right now. And speaking about jumping back on a log, I do want to wrap up with our final question because I can't believe it's already like time.
Okay.
but we'll definitely have to revisit another episode. So maybe you might be the Steve Martin guest. I don't know, but so I want to try to end all of these podcasts with the same similar question. So I want to, I'm a children's book story writer and a writer and an illustrator, so I think in pictures. And so let's pretend for a second that you have a time machine.
Okay.
And in this time machine, you can go back to any point in your life. And I define the Power Up Project, specifically Power Up, is the attention of turning your attention into your intention. Okay,
Ooh.
So that's the action of turning your attention into your.
Did you hear that? Say that again. Say it one more time.
The action of turning your attention to your intention.
I love that. Right? Okay, cool.
So if you could go back any point in time, anything's possible.
Okay.
So go back to any point in your life, last week or whenever, and give yourself one power up. What would it be and why?
You've asked me this once before. Dang. That's a tough one. So, what's interesting is thinking about that, because like I said, you have asked me that before. I cannot express to you how amazing it is to not know because of where I am currently.
Mm-hmm. Good.
But it would take, it wouldn't be something that was like last week or this past year, because this has been such a turning point. Like the last 2 years have been such a turning point.
That's an okay answer too, by the
way. No, but I'm sure there's a couple of them. So a lot of the panic attacks that I was having were centered around my grandmother passing away. Mm. So really short version of this story. My grandfather passed away probably close to 10 to 12 years ago now. He was like the rock of the Italian family. Mm. So as soon as he passed away, my grandma was like, I don't want to be here anymore. It was like super depressive. She was already a very small woman. She might have been 80 pounds for the last 10 years of her life. But in that time, grew a lot closer to her. She was always, I think you knew this, but my mom was never in the picture as we were kids. She had battled with alcohol and drugs for a very long time. That woman is not the same woman that I knew when I was really young. So my dad always joked about being 51% dad and 49% mom when we were growing up. So he did everything he could, which, I mean, he was a single parent of 2, so he couldn't always be around. So my sister did everything she could, but she was like kind of forced into this, so she didn't want to do it when she was younger. So my grandma was a big portion of that. And so when she had started to decline, which was a slow decline, she basically died of old age. I remember telling myself, I was like, when she passed away, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. I don't know how I'm going to handle that. I'm very afraid of losing it, because that's like, it was hard enough with my grandpa, but I still had, with her, it was like, I don't want to outlive my grandma. It was weird, because I was like, that's the portion of like my mom that was never there.
Right.
Now I'm clutching to.
Right.
So when she passed away, I was distraught. Only put on more 1 month later when my cousin, who was only 33, passed away from a heart attack. Mm. She had been misdiagnosed with asthma for a very long time. Just in and out of the hospital for basically from 16 until she was 33. She finally got a heart transplant about 2 weeks before 1 year heart attack.
Wow.
And that's when it became really evident to me that as a 30-year-old, or 29, I think at the time, maybe just turned 30, that it's very possible to happen at any time. Mm. And that scared the shit out of me. Mm. And so in those moments that's when like the panic attacks really started to get bad, because I was like, oh shit, is this happening? Mm. And again, it wasn't. And I think in that moment, it would be, hey, come back.
Right.
That would be the power up. Just come back. Like, because the moment I felt grounded and I was good, everything was fine again.
Right.
But I was definitely not the same person for a good 6 months to a year after it happened. Now it's been 2 years now, and I'm still, which is like I said, I've told you this before in person. I am honored to be somebody who inspires you, but it's literally you in the face of death. You said, "Fuck this." Bet me and bite me is basically what you said, right?
Yeah.
And it's you wake up every single day, and it's a gift. It's like literally you're one of the very few people that I know that literally lives by the cliche term like live every day like it's like it's a gift, because that's what you embody. So to know that like you're like, oh yeah, you inspire me. I was like, what the fuck did I do to inspire you of all people? It's insane. So yeah, it would ultimately be that, but just to segue and give you your flowers on that too, because it's, I mean,
I appreciate that. It's equally, I always make a joke that like I'm old enough to be your dad. Probably more of a cousin, but
like a really cool uncle.
Yeah, cool uncle maybe, but it is. But it is those people around you that inspire you, that validates all the reasons why you're showing up for it every day. And I think that, like you said, it's like, it's going back and reminding yourself, come back. This moment is the only thing that is real.
Yeah.
And I think that's the driver. And unfortunately, we have to wrap this up, I want to just like kind of point people in your direction. Do you have any social media stuff that you want to point people to?
Sure.
Anything that you want to share as far as like how they can get to know you more? They can reach out to you, give them your cell phone numbers. I
mean, if you want, I'm usually working, so I'm probably not going to be easy to get a hold of there. But I do have an Instagram. It's like half my own personal and half like a coaching.
Yeah.
It's just Rob Smaldino, PHP. So I'm sure.
And we'll put that in all the show notes and stuff like that. Absolutely.
But I mean, outside of that, come by.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'd say. It's like, let's come try a class, come to do a session. Let's talk. And even if it's not the physical part, we can always talk mental, because like, even if you're doing well physically, like there's always a better version of yourself out there. Yeah. So like, let's try to find it.
Absolutely. Well, Rob, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming in here. You make the world a better place. And I appreciate you.
Same, man.
All right, man. Have a great day.
You too.
Right.
Awesome.
Boxland Media. Think big.